Should we wear pants?
I'm not.
I'm not wearing pants.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no pants. Got it.
Because you're getting off something that you should get off. Yes, it's producing. You can fill that hole, and you're basically just restocking your cupboards for later. And so
Trav is always getting off when he fills that hole.
Always getting off when I fill that hole and stocking those cupboards. You can just ask my wife. If that happened, I'd be changing the tune here a little bit.
I'd be changing my pants because I think I might burst sharp.
I thought we weren't wearing pants on this episode, though.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Sights and sounds and edges found. You will now get down with The Underground, the show that goes to the depths of the Dynasty landscape. Dynasty Underground is back in the crib. I am Trav, hosting and West Coastin'. Of course, we're posted up on that Undroppables YouTube channel and your favorite audio platforms. With me tonight, of course, is the wise man, Jax Falcone. How are you, brother? Excited to see you once again back in the lab.
I'm doing great. I'm just looking to try and dodge all the bullets I'm going to get from you about Jalen Hurts finally finding his form. Good for you. I'm proud of you. I'm happy for you. You guys turned it around. Look at you.
Yeah, I think actually judging by the show sheet, you might actually dodge that bullet on this very show, Jax. You lucky bastard.
That's why I brought it up. I want to capitulate right up front. Great work.
I will let the listeners know I've already had a couple bullets flying in the group chat and previous to this show, so don't worry about that. And on the other side of Jax Falcone, not Joquavius Kuvatakis. Life is very busy for the man this week. So filling in for him, of course, Undroppables fam, the freak in the spreadsheets, Dan Wisner. Wiz, how are you? That retro Patriots cap, while it is Patriots, is crispy as hell, brother. Welcome back.
What's up, boys? Thanks for having me again. Good to be back. Nice that it wasn't as long as a break as last time, but yeah, I had to go with the retro Pats fit today, especially with how we've been playing. So
let's go.
Yes. Yeah, it is fun for the Patriots right now, and we're going to get into them pretty quick. But of course, I just wanted to say thanks to all those listeners who subscribe, stick around, listen to the shows. Of course, we're still pumping every week, and there's other shows on the channel, so check that out. Check us out on social media at The Undroppables, and find some of that gear at shop.theundroppables.com. That's where you can support us. So really appreciate that. Hit the Patreon as well. Love everybody that's in the Discord too. So lots of ways to get at the crew. And yeah, boys, tonight we got a fun show on tap. We are going to dive into some contending stuff. So we've talked about like assessing our rosters the last couple of weeks and kind of things that you should do if you're a contender, maybe if you are out of the running and you need to start selling. Today, we're going to focus in on those contending teams and look at maybe some buys, a little bit of theory behind the buys, and then maybe some players that we might be recommending for folks to go out and check in on. I think this is a good little next step as we move towards teams and leagues having their trade deadlines. You know what I mean? We're starting to assess these playoff teams, figure out how we can solidify them as that and turn them into bona fide contenders. And so thought that was some good conversation that we could have. But we're going to start, of course, with the rookie heat checks, boys. And it's not actually so much a rookie heat check on this episode as maybe a panic meter check, because some of these names there are major concerns for, and we are going to let the listeners know how they should approach these guys. Maybe you're going in headlong and buying, as we spoke about a little bit last week with Joe, or maybe you are staying away as much as possible. And so fitting that I have Patriots fans on either side of me. This feels a little bit weird, a little claustrophobic here, but that's okay. We're going to start with the running back situation in New England. We did talk about it a little bit last week, just with TreVeyon, but I think this week was maybe a little bit more alarming with him only playing 9 snaps. And just a check-in, obviously, Wiz, you're here. We got 2 Patriots fans, so I think it's good for us to do yet another check-in on TreVeyon Henderson and see what that panic meter is for a couple Pats fans that are here. So Wiz, why don't you take it away with your thoughts on where TreVeyon's at and maybe where he might be going?
Look, at this point, it's hard not to be concerned, right? I think, from a fantasy perspective, it almost feels like, it definitely feels like he's droppable at this point and is probably going to go down as one of the one of the worst fourth round. I think he was right around that fourth round ADP picks of the year. And I actually saw that fourth round earlier. The fourth round is just littered with some landmines in there. But yeah, I mean, look, I think we kind of knew out of the gates with Vrabel, especially what we've seen with him from the past. With he was the guy that kind of held Derrick Henry up at first, so we kind of know with some of the young guys, Vrabel tends to lean towards the vets a little bit, and I'm surprised that he hasn't gotten more run, especially with some of the stuff that we've seen from Ramondre earlier on in the season with the fumbles. Like you would have thought that would have been his window. And from like an efficiency standpoint and everything like that, like they're actually quite close in like yards per carry and, missed tackles forced per touch and everything. But clearly there's just like a trust factor there that Vrabel's not vibing with right now. And I think one of the nails in the coffin was seeing this past week, like in garbage time, when you would think that like, all right, like maybe you can get him some run or something like that. Terrell Jennings closes the game for them. And, then Vrabel tapped. Yeah, exactly. And then Vrabel daps him up in the locker room and says, we found our new 5-minute back. So, from a fantasy perspective, I don't really see any sort of runway to him starting to steal that unless like we're looking at like a Ramondre injury or something like that. And, the other thing is the trade deadline's coming up here, right? So like, do the Pats look to add depth via the trade deadline? But I think the panic meter on TreVeyon right now it's got to be extremely high.
Yeah, I think like definitely the stat lines say that, and what he has done and produced for fantasy gamers does say that as well. Jax, I'm going to kick it to you in just one sec, but earlier I was looking at some stuff and kind of saw a report from, I think it was Pat's Pulpit, talking, and it had some quotes from a Vrabel interview where Vrabel was talking about the fact that TreVeyon's still going to be a big part of what they do. That was just kind of the way that it worked out in this game. You kind of have to hope that's true if you are a TreVeyon bag holder. But a lot of it, from what Vrabel was saying, was the pass protection for Ramondre was just so good, which you can understand with just the size of him, and the fact that he's a veteran, been there for a little while. Specifically talking about how Ramondre had the block that sprung Drake May to be able to complete a pass on third down or something like that. And so those crucial situations, Ramondre is coming up despite those fumbles. And so I think there is still, I don't necessarily see them adding at the running back position at the trade deadline, hopefully. I hope that they are just more committed to trying to get TreVeyon going behind what's been an improved offensive line. So I think some of those comments can be taken as maybe positives for TreVeyon, that it just hasn't quite, the cookie hasn't crumbled his way just yet, but maybe it will start in the next like 3 or 4 weeks. But I think it's just kind of got to be a cherry on top for those managers right now, right? You can't be relying on that or that hopeful start where we've been putting him in that lineup, hoping that he gets maybe 6 to 10 touches, but one of them goes for 50 yards or something. Like we can't really be taking that dart throw even anymore. But I'm still being patient. I'm still probably putting out some feelers as far as buying. But Jax, where are you sitting with him?
Yeah, I mean, this one hurts a lot for multiple reasons. Number one, obviously, I had been pretty heavily invested in TreVeyon in the the early to mid first round and rookie drafts. So personally, in my portfolio, not great. He was a player that I thought would be sort of, you could plug him into your RB2 slot this year, as I kind of had him there in a few spots, and now you can't play him. Obviously, Wiz mentioning droppable. Obviously, in redraft, I don't think that he's droppable in redraft, quite frankly, because I'm rostering a ton of backup running backs, so he's still that. Obviously, we thought that with the Antonio Gibson injury, we would see more. We've actually seen less. All that being said, we still preach patience with rookie running backs, and you have to sit tight. Running back position is all about opportunity. He's not getting opportunity right now, so he's not producing. It's not like he isn't good or he is good. He may or may not be good, but it's more likely that he's fine. And when he gets opportunity, he'll be fine with it. Being chosen in the top 40 picks, early second round pick, is going to almost guarantee that he gets opportunity at some point. We certainly thought it would be sooner than now, but it's not going to be never. I can almost just promise you that. So yeah, you got to buy. If you can buy for a second or, something in that range, 2 seconds, I know those are fantastic opportunities to buy. But, if you want to move off of him, I suppose you could if you're trying to. We're going to talk about being a contender, but I just don't want to sell light like this. You know, I didn't want to sell like this off of JT when everybody was saying he's going to be a bust in the league. Look at JT now. I mean, he's the RB1 with a bullet behind Christian McCaffrey. I mean, he's just so good, absolutely dominating. I think you are going to see something completely different from TreVeyon. We had him as a Jahmyr Gibbs light. Well, he ain't no Jahmyr Gibbs, I can tell you that much. But he also still can take that role over in the NFL, and so I'm sitting right where I'm at, and happy to just sort of put him on your bench and go from there. But yeah, I'm not looking to trade light. That doesn't make any sense.
I actually got a couple of trades here off of Dynasty Daddy earlier today because, of course, Jack's trades are what the people want to hear about.
Yes, they do.
And I punched in TreVeyon's name, and I saw one that was really nice. 27 third and a 26 second for TreVeyon. I would pay that for TreVeyon all day.
Of course.
This next one I thought was just very interesting considering the other name that's on the other side. Bucky Irving in a 3 for TreVeyon and a 1. What side are you guys taking there?
TreVeyon and a 1.
Me too. Wiz?
What year is the 1? Just out of curiosity.
Both 26s, 26-3, 26-1.
I kind of lean Bucky there.
Really? Yeah, interesting.
The only reason why is because I agree with everything that Jax just said about top 40 pick, there's going to be opportunity there at some point. I think one of the things that's a little bit concerning for me, and look, I know it's so early in his career, but McDaniels specifically, in his time here with New England before, and pretty much every stop he's been at, he's been like a 2-back guy. And so seeing having other GMs rave about TreVeyon's pass protection, thinking that would be his opportunity to get on the field, and now we're starting to see less work. I almost think it's I'll take the proven commodity in Bucky, who I know is hurt right now, but I don't know. I think with something like that, I guess it would depend on where that first is coming from. If that's a later first, then I think that makes my decision a little bit easier. But I have enough concerns where if I'm getting somebody like Bucky back, and a third, I'll take the roll of the dice there personally.
Yeah, for me, I'm not paying a first plus TreVeyon to get to I'm just not paying that to get the Bucky. That's also not Dynasty game theory. The Dynasty game theory is you trade running backs for each other and get profit, not trade running backs for each other and give profit. So that'd be a really, really big pay to know that next year Bucky's definitely going to be better than TreVeyon, which we do not know that at all. And obviously we think that today, but I'll tell you, 2026, if you really think that TreVeyon is going to look like this in 2026, then you should sell for that price, I guess.
No, I don't necessarily think he's looking at that, but I think even if he improves quite a bit from where he is now, the gap to what we've seen from what Bucky can do to where we're hoping TreVeyon can get to is sizable, right? So TreVeyon can improve, and there's still a sizable gap from what we've seen. I mean, even this year, you're looking at almost a 20 point per game guy in Bucky. Yeah, he's on the field.
I think what comes into question for me there is Bucky's sustainability of that. So his ability to sustain that kind of clip. And I actually see in a vacuum, these are very, very similar upside players. And so I'm just kind of deferring to the first, you know what I mean? I think if given similar opportunity, TreVeyon performs just as well as Bucky Irving, and the fact that he just doesn't need as that many, similar to Bucky, right? Bucky kind of caught on when he was getting fewer touches. I think TreVeyon is going to do the same at some point this season, and it's just kind of waiting for that bomb to explode. I want to be the one who's holding the bomb, which isn't usually something that you're going to say in that situation. So we're going to keep moving to another explosive young running back. Bashal Tutin has thus been relegated to rotational backup duties, boys, alongside fellow rookie LaQuint Allen. On the season, LaQuint Allen has 0.5% higher snap share than does Bashal Tutin. Not what we were hoping, especially when Tank Bigsby was exiled to my Philadelphia Eagles, but this is kind of where we are with Tutin. I think kind of like you said there, Jax, as well, we're holding firm on him if we have him, right? You're not going to sell for peanuts. But but maybe we're talking a little bit more long-term outlook on him then. Wiz, what are you seeing for Tootin from kind of the long term as far as what he can do from a production standpoint, maybe less so from like a trade value standpoint?
Yeah, I think I really agree with what you just said there about a long-term play. ETN was a first-round pick. They picked up his fifth-year option, and I don't think there's been an extension up until this point, right? So,
No.
and also ETN belongs to, that prior kind of coaching regime and everything like that. So, and just with the way that we've seen kind of running back, go, as far as like pay scale and stuff like that, I don't necessarily know, especially with, the Jaguars having a $55 million quarterback and everything like that. I don't know if they're going to be in the market to pay somebody like ETN. So I think going forward, specifically next year, Tootin's still a guy that I like. And when you look at some of the efficiency stuff with Tootin, I mean, sixth in missed tackles forced per touch, ETN's 40th, second in missed tackles forced per receptions, ETN's 35th, 10th in missed tackles forced per attempt, ETN's 36th. So, like, I do think there's some efficiency stuff that maybe we start to get like a post-buy bump here for Bracial Tootin. So I would say from like a long-term perspective, he's definitely somebody that I still like have hope for, especially just because, he was drafted under Cohen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to me, these equations on the running backs are simple, maybe not easy, but simple. The idea of the running backs that you draft, you're not going to get like a Jordan Addison, Justin Jefferson situation with ETN and Tootin, or at least it's very unlikely. There's only a couple of like two back offenses that are actually worth rostering or worth starting. All the backs there, like Montgomery and Gibbs, that's a wagon. That's a totally different situation. And even week to week, you see Monty will have like 4 carries, and they're like, "Oops, sorry about that, guys. We didn't mean to only give him 4 carries." This can happen with 2 backs. So, having said that, the idea that you got to cling to with these running backs is you're going to get 0, 0, 0, 0, basically nothing, unstartable, and then high ankle sprain for ETN, and Tootin is a RB, top 10 RB on a weekly basis. And that's when you go, look at, I've got Basil Tootin. And you can either sell or start him then, but you're not selling or starting TreVeyon and Basil now. But you're also not saying, oh, they're not good because they're not playing. That's how this shit works. Like, if Tyrone Tracy hadn't gotten hurt and they sort of held Scatabo back a little bit for a longer period of time, Scatabo's still dope. And, that's just how this stuff works. So with the running backs, you have to be more patient. Now, it also means that you might get a Tank Bigsby run out where, you really never get there. There's plenty of those backs. That's baked into the price of drafting these running backs, which is why, you want to try and roster as many as possible so that way you always have one of them that's hitting. We didn't know Bucky Irving was going to be good, and then he was. He got an opportunity to play. But, a lot of these guys are just behind somebody. That's the way this stuff goes, So, look, a guy like, what's his name? Samson. Samson could be good. And look, if Judkins were to get hurt, Samson would be right in there, producing, I think, but he's not because Judkins exists. So you can't have these multiple W's on each team. And so with Tootin, I'm just, again, hanging in there, waiting for his opportunity if it ever comes.
Yeah, I think that's well put, boys. So next guy up might be the same conversation, though, so it might be quick. RJ Harvey in Denver, just like he's splitting the other 50% of snaps with Tyler asshole cleanser Bidet. Don't call me Bidet Batty. And we were kind of teased on RJ with 14 carries and 5 targets in week 4. Since then, he's only had 10 carries. But what's positive for RJ is that he has 9 targets in that span, and the next best running back is Batty at 4 targets. And so RJ Harvey has been just barely involved in the passing game. So there's signs of hope. So I'm thinking we could probably move on from RJ, boys. What do you think?
Yeah, the only thing I'd say here is it's a little bit of a different calculus for RJ Harvey because of his age. I think he's like, am I wrong? He's like either really close to or younger than Javonte Williams or some shit. Like, it's crazy, So seriously, you're like, wait, what? And it's like it's close. I think Javonte may be a few months older, but point of the matter is that we're looking at a little bit of an older prospect, little undersized, small school. He got the draft capital, but I'm a little bit more nervous about RJ because of the runway. With Bashal and even TreVeyon, you have a full year to give up if you had to, and you're not screwed. You still have a 22, 23-year-old player in the next year or so. Whereas with RJ, the more we wait, he's like 26 all of a sudden. You're like, wait, what's going on? He's not going to get a second contract. He's sort of was a win now prospect in your rookie draft, and he's not that. So, J.K. Dobbins is boxing him out. I would say that, while I feel the same way about RJ in the greater sense, and if you want to follow the same advice, go right ahead. But I would say you could absolutely think about selling RJ Harvey, and maybe it's a little bit of a different calculus. So just my 2 cents.
That window's a little bit shorter. He's only 8 months younger than Javonte.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, there it
RJ's almost 25, and Javonte's 25 and a half. So yeah,
that doesn't even make sense, right?
That's unbelievable. It feels like
he's older than Breece
Javonte's
Hall.
been around for a decade. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Breece Hall's about to get a second contract. Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Moving into some wide receivers, guys. I only got 2 here, but I want to talk about how worried we are about them. First one is Jaden Higgins, and I don't know if this is entirely a Jaden Higgins conversation either, right, guys? I think there is a massive CJ Stroud and a massive Texans offensive line factor that's coming into play here. You watched that last game on Monday night, and CJ Stroud was just getting harassed by the defensive linemen. And I think that's partially why he is uncharacteristically running the ball way more than he ever has this year, is because he's running for his absolute life. I think like Jaden Higgins is one that we have to start to ask some questions about, because we had some pretty high hopes for him. The opportunity has seemed like it should have been there for him, especially when Christian Kirk was injured, but it just hasn't yet, boys. Week 7 this past week was Jaden Higgins' first game over 20 routes run in any game this season.
Yep.
And some of his other season highs are for different categories. Season high in targets is 4. Season high in target share in any game is 12.9%. Season high receptions is 40 is 4. Sorry, 40 is 4. Season high in yards is 32. And his season high in fantasy points is 9.4. So no rookie ceiling for Higgins, like I specifically thought that there might be in that Texans offense. I thought he would pretty easily overtake Christian Cook and even Jalen Noel, for that matter, who had a pretty nice week 7, boys. So we can maybe lump Jalen Noel into this conversation considering the CJ Stroud factor. But Wiz, what are you thinking for Higgins? And are you maybe attacking this dip or a little bit more cautious considering situation?
Probably a little bit more cautious considering situation. Like, I think, anybody with eyeballs that watched that game realized that there's just problems way beyond. I'm not saying CJ's not at fault here, but there's problems way beyond CJ. And I do think it's, pretty concerning that you are starting to see a guy like Noel start to outproduce Higgins here. And the other thing is, you've had Christian Kirk, who's kind of been in and out of the lineup so far this year. And you would have thought that, as the 34th overall pick, that would have given Higgins a little bit of runway to maybe start to make some, headway in that wide receiver room. And the fact that we're not seeing that, and we're starting to see a guy like Noel kind of come out a little bit more. When you factor that in with kind of the situation that's going on in Houston right now, I wouldn't say this is a dip that I'm attacking. But, kind of to, Jax's point earlier on some of the other guys, I think you're in a spot right now where, depending on where you drafted him, are you really willing to just like sell low, like that low at this point? Or are you just hoping that, look, he's tied to a quarterback that I think long-term we still do like. He was the 34th overall pick. Sometimes wide receivers do take time. So I think if you sold right now, you're probably selling at like absolute rock bottom. So it's not something I'm attacking, but I'm also not looking to ship him out either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, you think of it this way. A second round pick is a straight reroll, right? Because that's where you got him. So, I have zero issue re-rolling for a second at this point. A single second in any draft, it can be 28, 27, 26. I don't really care. And if I can get a second round pick straight up for Jaden Higgins, sure, why not? Because all it is a re-roll. You're betting you're betting against history, or you're betting with history that players who perform the way he's performed thus far are generally not successful in the NFL as a wide receiver. It's just kind of the way it goes. And now things can change pretty quickly. He has been playing behind Xavier Hutchinson and was playing even behind Braxton Berrios this past game, which hurt my sensibilities a little bit. Being a Jaden Higgins fan. All that being said, yeah, Jalen Noel, sure, he outplayed him, I guess. But I mean, for the season, they're pretty close to one another. I tend to think that better times are to come for Jaden Higgins. He's like 1.17 yards per route run. It's not good enough. Nothing's really happening there. The offensive line was terrible. He got like 3 targets this last week, and none of them were on target. Before that, he had actually been pretty efficient, at least with his targets. So I think there's maybe a little bit of a silver lining. But in general, if you are holding Jaden Higgins and you can sort of even get the equivalent of a second round pick in value, maybe you add him to a bigger trade where, and I've done this on a number of occasions. Sometimes it can burn you. Like maybe I think I added Oronde Gadsden to a trade earlier and got rid of a Gadsden share to try and move something. And that probably hurts now. But, you look at these things and you're like, okay, I'm trying to add a few of these young pieces to something to get something. I think Jaden Higgins, you're pretty safe to add him as a second round value.
For sure. And I'm not not saying I would be necessarily attacking to buy for second round picks. I'd probably be looking to buy for maybe a little bit less than that if I could. Like if I could do a third straight up for Higgins, I would probably be smashing that, because I do think that kind of some of that silver lining is going to come to light. Maybe not necessarily this year. I think it will take a little bit more time to develop, but I'm still kind of holding in that almost post-draft take that I think Noel and Higgins are the future of this team behind Nico Collins. I think Noel potentially could have played himself into a little bit more snaps this year, which would be to the detriment of probably Higgins this year. But at this point, this year is kind of a wash for those guys, much as we were saying. So I think like I would probably attack it a little bit more bullishly than you were saying, Wiz, but not too much where I'm paying seconds to get him. Just because I think I'd probably rather hang on to that second round pick right now and just trust the reroll more than the situation that he's in. Because we look at what they're doing, like what we need is them to invest a ton into their offensive line. And I was taking a peek at their cap on Over the Cap today. They're only projected for another 17 million or to have 17 million next year in cap space. It's going to be some guys they got to re-sign and some roster spots they have to fill. Joe Mixon, actually cutting him could save them 6 million on the cap as well. So, but even so, looking at premium offensive lineman prices, that's not a ton of cap space. And we don't even know what's going to be out there as far as premium offensive linemen. So hard to bet on that for a second round price.
Jaden, at least, he's 9.3 yards per target, which is best on the team. That's ahead of, Nico and Noel. He's actually 61.5% success rate, which is just behind Dalton Schultz in terms of the receivers. Other than that, he's best on the team. So I think there's some hope there. It's not like he's been just awful, right? So his catch rate was great, especially coming into the game. Right now, with the 0 for 3, he's down to 70% catch rate. Fine. What actually it's 69%.
Some of that's on Stroud too, right? That's not.
Yeah, he's yeah, of course. That's kind of the point is right now, like, if you look at Nico Collins' line, like his success rate 41.3, his catch rate 56%, like yards per target 7.4. Like this is a guy who has taken the top off, like, and now it's not there for him. Only 13 yards per catch. He's only got 339 yards on the season, and that's just not good enough for a player like Nico Collins. So yeah, I think when it comes right down to it, it's not there for Houston offensively, and it starts with that offensive line for sure.
Moving to Green Bay, Wisconsin, guys. We're going to talk about Matthew Golden. Somebody who we were openly fading during the draft process, and after he got drafted to Green Bay late in the process, I started to get a little bit more interested just based on the fact that if none of these guys are going to get that many targets, I would rather take the higher upside guy that's not going to get a ton of targets. Haven't really seen that happen so much this year. Romeo Doubs has been kind of the wide receiver that's soaking up the targets along with Tucker Kraft there. So far, Matthew Golden has been clearly no better than like third on the target totem pole here in Green Bay. and likely worse when Jaden Reed comes back from being injured. So with Golden kind of confirming our preseason priors here, fellas, or I guess Jax, I can say that speak for you and myself and Joe. I don't know how you were feeling on Golden Wiz necessarily, but are we still holding firm on that and avoiding guys, or has this pendulum swung so far that we might take that cheap shot on a first round rookie? Wiz, why don't you kick it off from what you're thinking on Golden and how you would approach him?
I think from the sounds of it, I was pretty much in your guys' camp as far as he was a guy I was definitely fading in rookie drafts. And a lot of that is yet like I do, especially with wide receivers, I do factor in a lot of it kind of, if you don't produce at the college level at a certain level, then I do have some concerns and I'll typically let other people draft those guys. Um, but I think just one of the biggest things for me is just like the landing spot and just what we've seen LaFleur do with the guys in that offense, right? And I think Trav, you just kind of nailed it. It's like, yeah, we have seen, these last 3 weeks targets of 6, 5, and 4. He has been more productive on the targets that he's been getting. He's up to 1.89 yards per route run, which is, for a rookie wide receiver in his first, 6 games because of the bye, 7 games. It is encouraging, but you're about to get Jaden Reed back. I do think that at some point, I think Tucker Kraft starts to be more of a regular and not necessarily as much boom or bust that he's been. So while I like the player, I almost like him more for real life for the Packers than I like him for fantasy purposes. So not necessarily a guy that I'm rushing out to target or anything. I do think that what he's done with, kind of the opportunities that he's had recently have been somewhat encouraging. It's more just like that situation that he's in. They're so fine spreading the ball around to a number of guys.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's also the Christian Watson factor who could be returning later in the season as well, and might fill some of that role that we hope for Matthew Golden. So, Jax, are you singing any different tune on one Matthew Golden or?
Little bit. I actually think there's a little bit of hope here. First of all, he's a big play player. I can see why the quote unquote film guys loved him. He makes plays down the field and looks really good doing it, right? So I think there's a lot there in terms of wow factor, splash play, big playability. He's done some cool things. That being said, the targets, right? It's like 2, 2, 4, 6, 5, 4. It's fine. It's nothing crazy. But I will say, it's something. He's involved. He's doing stuff. It's not complete air for him. And, big enough plays, like you mentioned, Dan, the yards per route run, I'm at 171. I'm on PFF. I don't know if that's different than where you're looking. Whatever, 171, 189.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, that's fine. That's not bad. That's actually really good. So I'm okay with some of his peripherals. The issues with the team. Look, he's 22 years old. He's going to have some. He's a first round pick who's 22 years old, getting on the field and making plays. Not bad. I think for those who would be selling off of this as maybe even if I could get a second round, pay a second round for him, I'd get it. I'd pay that. I think I'd be more inclined to pay a second for Matthew Golden than for Jaden Higgins, and that's a little bit different for me. Preseason,
Mm-hmm.
I was definitely Higgins over Golden every time. We'll see. Maybe that'll come around. Maybe that'll turn. That's certainly possible. I'm not saying it's not, but I do see some light there for Matthew Golden, which is saying something for me. I think I'm still feeling like he's going to be more of this type of player than he will be a target earning, alpha, which is what we didn't think we would see out of him, and we're not yet. So, probably temper the ceiling, but I do think he'll be useful and will be a player that's involved in this offense almost every single week for as long as I can see in the future, right? Several years, right?
Okay, listen to this one, boys.
Yeah.
Dynasty Daddy, once again, shout out. This
Yeah.
trade just happened today in a Superflex 12 team start 9 full PPR. Chris Olave for Matthew Golden, a 26 third, 27 third, and 27 second.
In a start 9, it's probably Olave.
Yeah, probably ceiling. Hey,
Yeah,
because it's really to me that's 2/3 and 2 seconds for
Good
Olave.
point.
I'll take Olave.
That's a good point. That's a good
in
point.
A start 9.
Oh, that's good points. Let's see what else we got here. Golden and a 27 first for Javonte. Give me a 27 first for
Yeah, of
Javonte.
course.
Yeah,
8 days a
absolutely.
week. Yeah, it's interesting. This site is awesome, by the way. Shout out to
Yeah,
Dynasty Daddy because it's so
absolutely.
fucking fun to go on and just kind of see what the market's looking like. Matthew Golden for a 26-2, 27-3, 26-4.
Yeah, there you go. That's the
I'm t-
that's the second round pick, but you had to juice it a little bit to get him
and some
because the guy didn't want to
shrapnel.
sell.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
Interesting. Last rookie on the Darnell docket, boys. Cam Ward. We haven't talked too much
Mm,
about him on the show actually throughout the
no.
season. It's been, not much to write home about, I would say, for Cam Ward so far. But I think this is a good time for us to start kind of digging in and seeing how we're feeling, because I think we knew he was coming into an absolute dog shit situation. We weren't sure if he was a guy who could elevate that. So far, he hasn't really been that guy. I don't know if that tells us necessarily that the jury should be fully out on Cam Ward. I would still maybe put some feelers out there, depending, especially in those super flex leagues. His leash is going to be long. He's going to be throwing passes behind in games and things like that for kind of the longer term take. But where we are right now, for anyone who is trying to rely on him as a super flex quarterback too, they're not feeling great about it. Jax, why don't you let me know what you're feeling about Cam Ward, and then just kick it straight to Wiz.
Well, Wiz, I know you and I both loved the play where he just handed us the ball for the touchdown this past week. What a play that was!
Gift
That
wrap,
was,
baby.
I mean, couldn't have
Oh
written up
man.
better myself there. But look, the peripherals on Cam Ward are more like Charlie Ward. Thank you. I've been waiting months and months to make that joke. Hope it landed with our young audience. People are like, who the fuck is Charlie Ward? Google
Yeah,
it.
who is
Florida
that?
State, baby, two-sport athlete. If you don't know who Charlie Ward is,
I
you
think
don't deserve to.
there actually might be like a semi-famous British MMA fighter who is like got a big British following as well, named Charlie Ward, for any MMA heads there. So I
Okay,
don't know.
I
We're
think the
scraping barrels
one
here, Jax.
I think the one I'm referring to is
Yeah,
more popular
yeah. Carry
historically.
on.
Did he win the Heisman? Did Charlie Ward win the Heisman or some shit? I mean, he was close. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure he
You'll
did.
we'll have to look that up. I don't know. I'm not a college football guy, but I think he won the Heisman. Wiz is going to look that up while I say what I got to say.
I'm
But listen,
Canadian, so I don't know.
yeah, you don't even know how to spell Heisman.
There's a U in there somewhere, right?
There's an A, right?
He won it in '93, Jax.
There you go.
Right
Boom.
on.
See, I remember Charlie Ward, Heisman Trophy Award winner, but also not a good NFL quarterback to go along with it.
I was
Was a
still
pretty
in
good little
diapers
point
when he
guard,
won
though.
that, so I don't
Pretty
know.
good little point guard. Played with the Knicks, John Stocks. Anyway, I'm digressing. Cam Ward has nothing to do with the New York Knicks. Although, all right, look, completion percentage awful. QBR awful. QBR is 23.9. Like, that is awful. I think there's like a the number that if you just literally spike the ball every down, it would be better than this or whatever. I mean, he's really bad. 70.9 quarterback rating, all very bad. Adjusted net yards per attempt 3.66. I mean, it's really, really difficult to be at that number in the NFL. So it's really bad. Touchdowns to interception, 4 on the season after 7 games, 5 picks. Like, it's just really, really difficult to be this bad. And, I know my boy Scott Connor went out there and said, look, players like this don't tend to, turn it around. And, of course, everybody was accusing him of not being a film watcher, as if you need to watch the film to get nuance on a 3.9 QBR. Pretty sure that tells the story. So I'm definitely nervous. I've got only one Cam Ward bag. And I don't know. I tried selling it for a single first, couldn't get that. I'd love to get a single first for Cam Ward. There may be another opportunity to sell, just like there was with Zach Wilson, Kenny Pickett, other quarterbacks who flamed out. Anthony Richardson, right? So I will be looking to sell, and I think that's what everybody else should be doing. I would flip for a single first and move on. So that's my advice. Get off the boat.
Yeah, I think I'm in Jax's camp of like, look, if you can sell for a first and just re-roll that, kind of what we've been talking about with some of the other situations, then I would gladly go ahead and do that. I think if you're holding him, like right now, if you've got some shares, the hope is that you get through this year with that's just going to be a disaster, and you hope that, okay, we go out and we get like a good offensive mind to come in and be the head coach for next year, right? Like, is that a Clint Kubiak? Is he playing himself into a head coaching job now? And the other thing is, when you think about it, like, how many reclamation projects have we seen, have success after that everybody kind of wrote them off or everything like that? Now, obviously, a lot of these guys have had success quite far down the line here. So, in that scenario, you'd be waiting a while for Cam Ward. But I think one of the things that worries me a little bit is because I've seen a lot of chatter here, these last couple of days, especially with us just kind of playing the Titans, right? And the comps were, you can't bail on Ward yet. Look what, kind of May did those first 7 games and everything like that. And there is something to be said for, I think, some of that, right? May was turning the ball over at a really high rate, just like Ward. But when you start diving in a little bit more of the kind of advanced stats as far as passing goes, like, May's completion percentage was 10 points higher. His adjusted completion percentage was 7 points higher. His accuracy is about 8 points higher. His off target rate is lower than Ward's. And the other big thing with May is that you have the threat and the ability for him to
The
run.
rushing.
We're not seeing Cam Ward kind of run at all, right? So like May gave you, while he was struggling, kind of getting up to speed and adjusting to the NFL speed of the game, you kind of had
he was
that
like
built-in
Mike
rushing.
Vick. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so just not seeing that with Ward, like, that gives me some cause for concern as far as like where his floor goes. Not seeing that Russian side of it, but yeah, look, if you can re-roll it for a first, absolutely. And if you can't, then, and you want to hold on to him, you just really kind of have to hope for, all right, like, is the Titans front office going to get it right and bring in the right guy to kind of develop him?
And even if they
It's
do,
tough.
so what? Maybe that doesn't even fix it. So at the end of the day, I'm really nervous for Cam Ward. You're right. The rushing thing, I thought we were going to get some. I wasn't sure that we were going to get everything that we wanted on the rushing side of things, but he's nowhere close. He's not doing anything rushing the football. And you would think he would be, considering the number of times he has to scramble or whatever, just not getting it done. So yeah, for those reasons too, I think, because that's the other thing too, is like, if you see the rushing, if he's kind of making some plays with his legs, you can be like, look, all he has to do is get a little bit better, and then for fantasy, he's already there. Whereas now you say, well, look, if he's not going to run the football, he has to get a lot better to be worthwhile in fantasy. And so that scares the hell out of me.
For sure. Yeah, me too. And just kind of to the context that you've been talking about, looking at Dynasty Daddy here as well, Jax, people are also not getting that first for Cam Ward. And so you are not the only one. You are not the only one.
Make sure they're super flex leagues, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, for the most part, they are, like, for the most part. There's one Cam Ward for Juwan Jennings straight up in a super flex league.
Got to be a tight end premium.
Yeah, so like, I'm not even gonna get too deep into him, but the market is not there for Cam Ward. And I think to your guys' point, like, just allow him to sit there. There will be a pocket where he becomes worth a first, right?
I think
Like
so.
what you were saying, Wiz, too. New coaching staff next year, renewed optimism. He's worth a first. You sell him then. So I think the outcome's always the same for Cam Ward, in that you're trying to sell off of him within the next like year or so. You just have to wait till that pocket is a first, as opposed to like a second plus like it is right now, because you really want to get that first on a reroll of Cam Ward, because he is a quarterback in a super flex league.
The other thing that you can do too is you could maybe take a 27 first, your 27 first in Cam Ward, and try and get a Jackson Dart. Someone might be like, this is crazy. I'm getting it's just the first. They can sort of rational their way into that, saying, well, at least I got the first, and to 27, that's the best draft class ever. I'm going to get Jeremiah Smith for sure with that pick. Just book it at this point.
And speaking of, Jax, just as you mentioned the college football player, I'd like to just give a quick shout out to the undrafted this week. You had Felix Sharp on, and that show will be going up, probably up by the time this show is up, actually. So just any of our listeners, as we are one to do, got to mention that they should go over and listen to that undrafted pod. You're starting to get into the prospects, Jax, and just taking a little bit of a listen to that behind the scenes made me want to get into the PFF college data, but I had to like slow myself down, because it's like, hey, I gotta prep for this pod. I gotta do this. I gotta do that. I cannot
You're not ready,
be digging
pal.
into a brand new data set just yet. So that's going to be coming soon. Thank you.
I'll tell you though, I hadn't done the undrafted too much lately, and I got a few DMs, and I thank everybody for checking in on me, making sure everything was cool with it. But yeah, it's coming back around. We'll have more undrafted shows, so keep tuning in. But we've got one this week with Felix, we got one next week with Theo, which will be fun. So yeah, stay tuned in.
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, thanks to all of our listeners for this show as well. We love the community that's being built around it. Lots of fun is had. Lots of people who get the spirit of the show and they carry it forward to their interactions with us out in the social media world and stuff. So we appreciate that. Make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel. That is the best way to support and to watch our work. So now we're going to get into some contending stuff. Jax, I know you're fired up. We're going to start talking a little bit of theory here. Wheelhouse for you. I was telling Wiz that oftentimes on these theory segments, I kind of just sit back and let you and Joe Quave do some of the heavy lifting. So excited to do that again and add some contributions where I will. But I felt like I said at the top of the show, it's a good time to hone in on those contenders, and not because we are so arrogant that we think our listeners are only contenders, because we know we have the full spectrum listening to this show. But because I think those are the ones where it's a little bit more pressing. Start doing that prep, right? Start working to make sure that you have a roster that can make a run, not just get to those playoffs. Some of us have trade deadlines coming up. Some of us have weaknesses on our rosters that we are wondering about. And so come to the Dynasty Underground and we're going to talk to you about it. And so I think we're going to touch on some of that theory first. Maybe we drop some players as we're talking about some of the theory. And then I have a fat list of players, fellas, that we are not going to get through the entire thing.
No.
But there is a buffet of choices for us to talk about. And so we won't be short on content on this episode. But I think thinking about the time, right? I was talking about the trade deadlines are coming up, probably not just yet. Usually they're in like the week 10 to 12 range if they exist. Talking about times to buy, guys. And I think, for sometimes for me, times to buy is when I have some free time to go out and fire off some offers. But I think there is a lot more edge to be found by attacking at the right times. Maybe you're trying to buy certain archetypes of players at certain times when value is at a certain point. And so, Jax, let's kick it off with you, since you are the Miyagi of the game theory, of course.
Yeah.
Do you have any preferences or any edges for the listener, I guess, as far as the right times to be buying to put yourself into contendership?
Yeah, I have a very strong opinion on this. JB Cho, for those who know JB Cho, he's awesome.
He
Such a great
knows.
human being. I mean, JB Cho knows. He's such a great dude, and so he and I DM a lot, and I can tell that I'm a little bit of his go-to guy when he's got a trade. He'll like DM me and be like, "What do you think of this?" And I appreciate that, and I'll give him my honest feedback. And he was talking about making a trade for a running back in a certain league. I think it was Jalen Warren for a second. And he's like, I could really use some running back help. And I said, look, it's a fair trade. That's fine. I said, Jalen Warren's great. Trading your second for Jalen Warren, I think that's fine. I said, but personally, I would wait. Because once you fire the shot of the 26 second, it's gone. And if Jalen Warren gets a high ankle sprain, then you didn't fix the problem for the playoffs. You don't have a solution, and you have to go reach into your bag of tricks again and do it again. You have to use your 27 second to go get DeAndre Swift or whatever the case. And, so I preach patience. If you're already a playoff team, just let it ride for a little bit, let it ride. See, you might have a much bigger need coming that you don't realize because your Trey McBride is going to break his ankle, and you're like, dude, what the hell?
Dude, you
I
gotta
need to
stop
do
saying this
something.
shit.
Yeah,
I know, right?
You gotta
dude.
stop saying this shit out loud.
Scary, isn't
This
it?
is
It's
scary that
scary.
you're putting this into the universe. But it could happen.
But it's true. Dude, my favorite player, one of them, so Malik Neighbors, I mean, that's just crushing. If
Mhm.
you're a Malik Neighbors team, you're counting on Malik Neighbors. Like, this is not like a, yeah, and by the way, I also got this guy. It's like, no, I got Malik Neighbors, I got blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So you don't know when that's coming. You don't know how that's going to play out. And like I said, once you spend the capital that you intend to spend on the final piece, it may not be the final piece at all. And so I always say, wait, you got this far with your team. Keep letting it ride, let it ride, let it ride. You might get a Kamani Vidal. Like all of a sudden you have him on your team. You might get a player like that just all of a sudden, Isaiah Davis could be a starting running back for you. You just don't know where that's going to come from. And it could be already on your roster. All that being said is I'd rather win without giving up my future picks. The other thing too is depending on what type of lineup this is. Like we just talked about a 12 team start 9. You're in a 12 team start 9. Dude, if you're worried about your RB2 slot in a start 9, you probably aren't a contender to begin with. Like what is going on? That team has some other issues. We need to have a talk. You shouldn't have to be spending your draft capital to get an RB2 in a start 9. You should be maybe thinking about, packaging up, a couple of things to go get CMC, although he's probably on a playoff team already, but you get my point. Finding a way to get an actual difference maker, a real queen chess piece that can change the board. But all that being said, unless I'm getting something that I know is going to be good, like if you're trading and you're getting JSN, sure, whatever, dude. Like, yeah, he's going to be good for years to come. The reason I say that hesitate with a player like Jalen Warren or DeAndre Swift is because come next year at the start of the season, these guys might not even be starters. They might just be backup players. And, you lost them this year because they ended up not being good or got hurt. You spent the draft capital and you still have nothing to show for it. It was a net negative all the way around because you mistimed it. So I would say wait. Wait. Let it play out. Let's see what happens and go from there. That's my 2 cents.
Totally. Like the avenue for them to descend in value is much higher than a guy like a JSN, because JSN's only avenue is basically a catastrophic injury,
right?
Because he's cemented as a
But
guy.
But even JSN, you could flip. Like I took, I sold, Malik Neighbors and JSN. We made that deal. Like you can just get JSN for Malik Neighbors. You can get CeeDee Lamb for JSN probably. I always say your 2026 second round pick cannot get a high ankle sprain.
Right. Okay, boys. And so I think, next to the time that you're buying is, of course, the cost that you're going to buy with. And so I want to talk to you guys about your thoughts on whether you're in a contender situation when you're trying to make that push, whether you're looking to buy high on, performing commodities. Like if you were looking to go out there and spend those multiple firsts that you have on a guy like a JSN to get him on your roster in these situations, or would you be looking to find some more upside value guys? I think of a guy like maybe Zay Flowers, who has Lamar Jackson set to come back and could see a bit of a spike. Maybe a lower value guy like a Kayshon Boutte from your guys' Patriots, who is producing much more than even his trade price right now probably would be. And so, Wiz, why don't you let us know, like, what do you think on that? Would you be just attacking the elites all the time and paying those premium prices? Or maybe more to Jax's point before, would you be trying to pay as little as you can in trying to get towards that, which seems like a common sense thing for sure. But it really, and obviously rosters come into play here, but maybe if you do have kind of a lean a certain way, where would it be?
I think I very much lean with Jax, right? And I think a huge part of, being successful or, putting yourself in the best position to be successful when it comes to trading in Dynasty is you have to be brutally honest with the roster that you have, right? I
Yeah.
think understanding like where your holes are and not having hopium while you look at it and saying, well, hey, like, he's been good so far this year, but realistically, you can have hot starts for 5-6 weeks and it's just not reality, right? And you can have that at a few positions, and now you go ahead and you push your 26-second in for a Jalen Warren, and you push a 27-second in for somebody else, and you're like, I'm set now because these guys that are overperforming the first 5-6 weeks, then they start to fall off, and now you start to get holes. So as far as buying goes, there's a couple situations for me. One, it's definitely, I try to find value wherever I can. But if the opportunity to buy an elite player, like in my Dynasty home league, for example, right, like that's a start 8. So if you can go out and get an elite player, then I'm always kind of listening in something like that, especially when, your starting lineup is just, that below that 10 number. But the other thing that I look at too is that if you are in a position where, like myself, for example, in my home dynasty, I just went out. I'm 5-1 now, 6-1. I just went out and bought Cortland Sutton for a 26 second, and a 27 third, and it's not something that it's kind of out of the realm of like how I usually operate. But at the same time, I had, Puka out last week. I had Garrett Wilson, who's kind of been banged up, and there's just a tons of turmoil there. And to me, with the way that my roster is set up from an age standpoint, with a core standpoint, I know that we can't predict the future, right? But I know that, look, those picks are likely going to be, later in the second, likely, and then a third round pick in 2027. It's like, all right. So if I'm looking to bolster something like that and I don't have to give up like a premium asset in a first or something, then that's something I'm willing to do. But I'm definitely on Jax's side as far as patience is key. And you really need to pair that with like brutal honesty of like where your team is at.
Yeah.
Like if you're, at this point, if you're 3-4 or something like that, and you're hoping that Jalen Warren is going to fix things, the likelihood is that that's not going to happen. So, and I guess, Jax, that's kind of my question for you. It's like, you've managed, I can't even guess how many teams at this point over the years, but like, what is your process as far as deciding when to not necessarily pull the plug, but deciding on, okay, what's going to make my decision to buy and what's going to make my decision to either start selling off, right? Because I think that's a lot of the things that, some people struggle with. It's like, at what point does the hopium need to stop and you really need to take that brutal look at your roster?
Yeah, I love the idea that even if you're a contender, you should be willing to sell. Because you mentioned a player, Zay Flowers and Keishon Boutte. It's like, you think about what Zay Flowers is worth versus what Keishon Boutte is worth. Well, you might have Keishon Boutte on your bench and not starting because he's not a starter, but Zay Flowers is. But you can maybe get a first, maybe a 28 first straight up for Zay Flowers. Well, sell Zay Flowers for the 28 first and let Keishon Boutte play. He's as likely to score fantasy points for your team as Zay Flowers is, and you just banked a 28 first. So I think you always have to be willing, and that would be in a situation like your 8-man, starting roster where it's like, look, man, you're either hammer hunting or, if you're playing a guy like Zay Flowers, he's not winning your weeks likely. I mean, I get that Zay Flowers is more valuable than Keishon Boutte, but you get the point. You probably have someone behind him, a Sutton, players like that, that can come right in and play, and you won't skip a beat because it's such a shallow starting lineup. So I just think each situation you should be willing to, do anything, like even as a contender, to sell, because you might have extra shit that's not starting for you that might expire by the end of the year. What do you need that much depth for? So I think those are the types of moves that you just can't ever be afraid to pull. Be like, if someone would be like, oh, I can't sell, I'm a contender, man. It's like, yeah, you can. Well, yeah, you can. You still have points on the bench. You have plenty of different ways to put your roster together. I sold Travis Etienne and Cortland Sutton for like a 27 first, because I was like, yeah, I'm starting them, but I think it may even be a Zay Flowers team or whatever. I've got other players that are like kind of also in that like zone that it's just as well. I think I even just have been playing Rashad White in that league now, and like whatever the case, you get my point. Like there's always these guys. That's a team that I think can win it, but got a 27 for Travis Etienne and Cortland Sutton sounds really, really good. So I just think there's multiple different ways that you can manage your team, but you should always be thinking of any possibility buying or selling. You don't have to only sell if for a a rebuilder too, depending on what you're buying. I mean, if you can buy these injured players that Burrow at a discount, or you see what I'm saying. So like, there's all different ways to go about that. But I just think that if you're a rebuilder, the one thing that I tend to think about as a rebuilder or a team that's so to speak not in it, is you have to train your brain to think, I do not care about today's value.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant.
Yep.
Today's value is irrelevant. So I need to trade on today's value, but I need to be operating on, the value like right before the NFL draft. Like, what are things going to be worth then? If I can, that's because that's the next time shit's going to matter for me. It doesn't, like, none of this values matter, today. It's what's going to happen with this roster when it's all said and done. What's Cortland Sutton's value going to be in the offseason? What is player X's value going to be this offseason?
Yes.
That's where, and I need to draw a line from where we are today, where that is. And if there's a likely drop in that player's value, I want to get off that. Even if I have to sell light, who cares? I already know it's going to be worth less than what I'm selling for in the offseason. Conversely, if something's going to be worth more and I can buy at today's value, that's what I want to do, because I'm only transacting in today's price, but cashing in next year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think some of like there is such a mindset piece of that, like what you said as well. I think what happens sometimes when we don't sell some of those guys, if it's like a name brand guy who's produced huge before but was maybe a tier down from that this year, versus say you have one of these guys like a Keishon Butte or a Cortland Sutton who's been producing really well, I think it's hard for us to put that guy in that slot for an AJ Brown and rely on him and trade away that AJ Brown, other than seeing those names in our starting lineup and the fact that we have Sutton as depth, right? I think there's a huge mindset. Something I've been trying to do a lot more, leaning into some of these risk players. Like, if they're producing like that, try and trust it, and get those assets, because what we find is sometimes what is a sell now is a buy later, right? You were talking about that value next year, right? What you get in those draft picks for those maybe aging wide receivers that you trade away, what you get in those draft picks tends to turn into a buy. So it's almost like a phantom sell, really, because you're getting off something that you should get off. Yes, it's producing, you can fill that hole, and you're basically just restocking your cupboards for later. And so I think it's
Trav is always getting off when he fills that hole.
yeah, always getting off when I fill that hole and stocking those cupboards. You can just ask my wife. So yeah. And another thing that I wanted to mention there as well, and then Wiz, I'll give you space if you have any questions before we get into some of these player names, boys, is you got to remember what you're buying for, right? Are you actually buying for the next 10 games to win you a championship? Because then that's a hard mindset to get into as well when we play Dynasty, right? It's hard to buy for that because you always want more than just this season. And so I think, if you're just buying for this season, maybe you're not willing to pay more of that premium. But if those assets are things that are going to be cores of your roster, just be okay to pay that premium and trust your evaluation that these are assets that are worth that premium. You know what I mean? I think trust in yourself and confidence to go out and do it is a big, big piece of making some of these big trades.
I can leave you in there, Trav, too. It's basically you're only transacting on two things. You're either transacting on value, meaning like, for instance, obviously when we're buying, I'll bring up a bad name, Jordan Addison. Huh?
Ooh.
I knew this was going to come up at some point.
Maybe that's the first name we're talking about.
When you're buying Jordan Addison or Rashee Rice before the season when they're suspended, and you're like, their value is what they are now, but I already know their value is going to go up when they start to play because they're good players, but they're not available now. It's like Brandon Ayuk right now. It's like,
yes.
Nobody
even
fucking
George
wants
Kittle
Brandon.
before he came back.
Nobody wants Brandon Ayuk right now. What the hell? I'm playing fantasy football. He doesn't even play. So the value's low. So I'm buying value. There's zero production. So it's either value or production. And a lot of times what you're purchasing in a stretch run and a playoff push and a title run is production. And so a lot of times I will look at that as if I'm going to buy production. I've got a few names and I'm sure you want to get there, but
get into them, brother. Fire away.
Well, but those are the two things that you're looking at, right? So, for a rebuilder, I'm only interested in value. I don't care about production. As a matter of fact, if anything, in many of these situations, if you're playing max PF, I want the production off my roster because it's only hurting my draft pick. So I almost specifically don't want production. But even if you don't play in that type of league where you can, whatever, there's different rules, you still don't care about production because you don't give a shit if you score points or not. All that being said, when you're purchasing production, you can purchase production at JSN prices. Those are expensive points. But where are their cheap points?
Yes.
we want to start with a certain position, Trav, or how do you want to get
You
into this
said
conversation?
Jordan Addison, so let's talk some wide receivers, brother. I got some on my list, but get in there.
Yeah, I think the best one right now is Devontae Adams, because Devontae Adams is, I think, a wide receiver one, or at least I think
Yeah.
rest of season, he's somewhere in the top 12-ish wide receivers. Maybe he's firmly in the top 12 for some. I don't really know. I think he's certainly close. And yet, because he's 32 or 30, whatever he is, years old, I get it. He probably only has this year, maybe next year. I mean, that's not a ton. Who knows what's going to happen? But that being said, I'm pretty sure I can see what I'm going to get for the rest of the season. And it is wheels all the way up. It is a concentrated target share in Los Angeles, where if Puka's ever hurt, which of course is always a possibility because he's the most badass football player on the fucking planet and he plays hard all the time and he's blocking and doesn't give a shit, that he's liable to get hurt. And if so, then at that point, we see what we've seen with Devontae over the last couple of weeks, which is multiple touchdowns, an increased target share, an absolute wide receiver one for the rest of the way. But even with Puka there, it's those two, and they get 50+% of the targets every single week.
Bingo. Yeah, Devontae is actually the number 2 wide receiver right now in expected fantasy points, Jax. And so that means that all of the opportunity just breeds fantasy points. And so I think that's a great buy. We've been preaching him as a buy
Right. All
throughout.
season. Right.
Throughout.
Startups.
And I think more so than just him, this is kind of an archetype that you buy at this time of the season when you're trying to look for production, is those aging wide receivers who people are trying to find their way off of, right? Like you put that second and some young wide receiver that people have hope on, like a second and Jaden Higgins, maybe to people like us who love some Jaden Higgins, gets you Devontae Adams for that title run. And so I kind of like approaching that archetype of those aging wide receivers, like Mike Evans every year for the past 5 seasons. You know what I mean? Keenan Allen right now with the Chargers is a decent aging veteran buy. So
And
they're
I've
always
got to
out
say,
there,
what happened to Mike Evans is why you should be eager to sell Mike Evans
Fair
more
point.
so than you should be eager to buy Mike Evans.
Yep.
Because Mike Evans' price and Devontae Adams' price isn't necessarily going to go up between now and week 10, 11, 12, whatever the case, whenever you really need to make a move for the playoffs. But their ACLs could go out.
Yeah, for sure. Evans might not have been the best example, especially
No, it was a great example.
The timing, but
because I've been trying to sell him. I sent an offer to JJ Zachariason in the Dynasty Game Theory Invitational. Evans it was basically centered around TreVeyon Henderson, and he did smartly decline it and didn't even counter. But then Mike Evans goes ahead and breaks everything, and I'm like, there we go. I can't even have the conversation anymore. I can't be like, well, what if I added there's nothing. I'm dead. I'm dead in the water,
Yeah, 100%. What do you think, Wiz, on like the Devontae Adams piece, or maybe some of those kind of veteran wide receiver conversations that we were having?
I think the veteran wide receivers they present some of like the best like discounts at production, right? So like, because we're like the dynasty community is so obsessed with age and age curves, and while there is like absolutely like validity to that, I think depending on where you're at like in a season, you're able to get that discount on production, right? And so if you see an opportunity where, hey, you're in third or fourth place, you feel like you're on the cusp, and you find a manager that like, hey, look, they're ready to throw in the towel. They've got Devontae Adams on their team. They're looking to start rebuilding and stuff like that. Throwing out like a late second, or like what could be like a late second for somebody like Devontae Adams. I think that's where like Jax talks about it a lot, right? Is finding the value. If I'm going to go ahead and sell something like a second or something like that, you do prefer to get like those situations where it's like, all right, concentrated target shares, the guy that's produced like year in, year out, and has even higher upside to what he's already done if his running mate, like a Puka or whatever, goes out. So that's something that like, and Trav, I think your other example is Keenan Allen. I think that's perfect, right? Like he's up there at 32, 33 years old right now. There's some people that, if they're in the bottom of the barrel and he's just on their team, like you could probably, I wonder if you could get away with like a third and a fourth for him somewhere. Right. Like, or like even just a second in the future. But again, I think a lot of it goes back to being brutally honest where you're at. Right. Like it just, that to me, is kind of what dictates like how I move. But I do feel like the aging wide receivers are some of the best discounts at current production.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing, like I mentioned, expected fantasy points. I really like using that to find some of these guys that you can buy at a value, because these are guys that are getting every opportunity, and maybe it's just not necessarily going their way. We look at a guy like Chris Olave. We've been talking about buying him on the show. He's the wide receiver 3 in expected fantasy points. And you could probably definitely get him for a second round pick. I mean, this past week he had some production, so maybe people are starting to get a little bit more excited. But yeah, I love finding those guys and using just expected fantasy points is something I've been kind of digging into this week for running backs as well. And so I think it's a good tool for finding some of those buy lows and players that you can sell as well.
Yeah, if
Any
you're
other
looking
names
for,
you got there, Jax?
yeah, I had a couple. I mean, I think Cortland Sutton's one of them. So ironically,
Good one, yeah.
Wiz made a move for Cortland Sutton. He's definitely the out there, and he looks good. He might have another couple of years left. I don't really know. I mean, even if this is it, which I don't think it is, but even if it were, this is his last year of production. He's still worth it, I think, at his current level of production. But I think there may be a year or two left at reasonable production where you either can maybe get off again, for a little less than you paid, but maybe recoup a third, in the off season, and then whatever. You get my point. The other one, Michael Pittman,
Dude,
always
great one.
undervalued. Nobody likes him. I mean,
Unreal.
everybody hated him this off season. I know he had a really down year last year, but it was an Anthony Richardson season. The 2 seasons before that, 3 seasons before that, he was like 150 targets a year. Like, dude was earning targets. He's doing it again this year. Michael Pittman, definitely a buy. You get a little bit of a runway with him. I think he's still only 27 from what I'm remembering. And then the other one was Wan'Dale Robinson at the wide receiver position. Look, Wan'Dale, fuck, man. Wan'Dale, Tez Johnson right now, these are the types of players that I don't think dynasty gamers are thinking of them as like valuable assets. And I get that. But production assets, I think they are for the rest of the season. A. B, they're somewhat young. So, like, if this kind of catches for either one of these guys, a Tez Johnson or a Wan'Dale Robinson, they could actually have a role in the coming years that mimics, what they've been doing, recently. Like right now, if you're the Giants, if we all took over the Giants, we're like, okay, we got Malik Neighbors coming back. Wan'Dale, let's keep his ass. He looks pretty good out there. Like, he can definitely be the slot wide receiver on this team. We just need one more outside guy, and we're good to go. So I think Wan'Dale has a little bit of value there as well.
Yeah, I like that one for sure. And I think like Zay Flowers is one that I threw out there as somebody who's going to have some increase in value coming up with Lamar Jackson coming back. He was looking really good before that as well. And so he's a guy I would put out there, maybe a little bit more on the high end. Garrett Wilson, though, I've just been a big lover of Garrett Wilson. Things aren't looking great for the Jets right now, but you have to believe
bit
that
more of a
value
buy there, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
a little bit
because
more of a value.
you're
Sure.
buying the value dip because this dude's good, and to your Baltimore point with Lamar coming back, I think Derrick Henry's a buy. Derrick Henry was a league winner last year, and right now people are looking at him like he's dead. I think he's probably somewhere in between there. I don't think he's dead. I mean, he was kind of dominating a few games early this season. I know he's a little bit game script dependent. If they get behind, he doesn't do much, but Derrick Henry could be a nice buy right now and maybe pretty cheap.
Totally. And I would lean more towards him like his outcome becoming a league winner than to be a full-on bust by season's end, right? Like
Same.
I would expect him to have a better second half than a worse one for sure. So I think that's a good
The only
buy.
thing you got to watch out for, Trav, is if they lose this week or whatever, they could start pulling the plug a little bit early on this season. They could start, I mean, down playoff time, they might be like,
Yeah.
you know what, we're going to sit a couple guys, this, that, and the other, because they're not making the playoffs at 1-6, 1-7. They got to start winning right away.
No, I wonder what the level of pride factor that comes in there. Maybe there's some divisional matchups in there as well that come up where they just don't want to sit down Derrick Henry to give other people or give other teams kind of an easier path. Who knows? But I would still put that feeler out there because he's just a good player. He's just a good player. Since we're getting into running backs, Jax, I got DeAndre Swift and Josh Jacobs are guys that I might think about. Josh Jacobs is still a pretty high-end buy, and I think age and tread on the tires would make me a little bit cautious on the price. But I think that might be a nice little boost to a running back 2 position for somebody. And DeAndre Swift, like I thought, like he was one of the best value running backs in the draft we talked about. I picked him up in the underground league and he has done wonders for me. So shout out to him there. What do you guys think about buying DeAndre Swift? Because I would probably think about spending a second on DeAndre Swift. Would you guys be that bold?
I think for me, it, probably yes, Trav, gun to my head. It is interesting to see Manungai kind of, take on a little bit more here these last couple weeks. But it does seem like the Bears offense is starting. I know Caleb didn't have the best game in the rain against the Saints the other day, but they've won 4 in a row. Swift has actually been like quite a big part of that. He's always been the nice thing with Swift is you're not just buying a guy that's getting carries, like you're buying a guy that can make an impact in the passing game as well. I mean, that was primarily what he was, drafted for when he was originally in Detroit. He does have the Ben Johnson connection there. So like, because there is kind of that previous connection and we are seeing production with him under Ben Johnson now, that does, kind of lend me to believe that I would pay something like a second for him. Again, I think it's just extremely dependent as far as like, assessing and being honest of where you're at. But I don't think that's a bad price for somebody like him if you're looking to make a stretch run. Because it's not like
Yeah,
he's getting up there in age either, Jax, right? Like,
He's
I
just
totally
over
agree.
26.
okay.
That's the production buy though, right? Like
Yeah.
I wouldn't be buying him for much past this year. Anything past this year is kind of a cherry on top. A second is steep, but the production could be pretty nice for Swift down the stretch.
Did you see I sold DeAndre Swift with Marcus Mariota and something else? I forget what. Nothing. Like nothing. And got a late. It's gonna be a late first, but it's in a 14-team league for DeAndre Swift. So
Nice,
yeah, it was
man.
DeAndre
Nice.
Swift. I can't remember what other piece. It was some other. Honestly, it was a nothing piece. It was Mariota and DeAndre Swift for a 7-0 14-team first round pick. So I mean, he's likely going to be in the
First round
playoffs,
pick in
maybe even a
14
bye.
team though. Any first in a 14
Yeah,
is so fucking valuable.
true
And
that.
the first, when there is a first coming into play where you're sending off DeAndre Swift, that's where it starts to go from like, oh yeah, that's a pretty fair trade. I like that deal to like, oh shit, yeah, I'm taking that deal. Hell
Yeah.
yeah. So that was a really, really nice move, fella.
I got a couple here. This is interesting. So you
Do it.
talk about playoff. Look, health aside, because you never know if these guys are going to stay healthy. You just don't know. But one of those that I bought this year was a value and production play, which is Brees Hall.
Jack, I
Mhm.
was just about to bring him up, Jax.
Totally.
Yeah. So Brees Hall is a value and production play. Now, health always a question, but they play the Dolphins in week 14. They play the Jags in week 15. They play the Saints in week 16. And of course, them in week 17 because it's the Patriots, but joking a little bit. But just a great schedule down the stretch. Same thing with one other, and I'll let you speak to this. Wiz is Chase Brown, who also potentially could get Joe Burrow back. If not, he's got the gunslinger Joe Flacco throwing it around, and they also have a very soft schedule down the stretch. As Cincinnati plays, hold on, I got it right here. They play Baltimore in week 15. Actually, in week 14 too, they had a cream puff. Buffalo's been giving it up on the ground, and
Yep, they have.
16, yeah, and then 16 they play at the Dolphins. Like you can't ask for a better one. And then 17 in the Super Bowl they play Arizona Cardinals. So like just the schedules for both Brees Hall and Chase Brown down the stretch really strong, and they're both young enough that I think next year they have a role.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Obviously.
I couldn't agree more on Brees Hall. Like I said, he was somebody that I was just about to bring up. When you look at a lot of his efficiency stats, they're still like he still leads the league in explosive rush rate. On what has been an abysmal situation in New York, right? And so the other nice thing that I do love about Brees is that you have the receiving floor that's kind of built in with him as well. And when you look at it, like he's 24 right now, which is crazy because it feels like we've been
Unreal.
talking about Brees Hall forever. And if you want to, like, Jax has kind of touched on this a couple times, and I think it's extremely important, is because a lot of like when you're looking at buying some of these guys, you do want to take that element out of like what value is today and where it may be down the line, right? And I mean, who's to say that something doesn't happen in the trade deadline the next week, and Breece Hall is a Chief, and then what happens, right? Like what happens to his price then, right? Like then you're an immediate profit. And again, look, like we're not trying to predict the future here or anything like that, but I think buying a player like Breece,
I would change my tune on Chiefs running backs if that happened. If that happened, I'd be changing the tune here a little bit.
I'd be changing my pants because I think I might Brashart.
Yeah. I thought we weren't wearing pants on this episode, though.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. I just Brashart myself with that Breece Hall comment. That's great.
Right on. You're gonna have to clean up the garage floor after the show, bud.
Studio floor.
Studio. Sorry. Fucking doxing you.
And it's mom's garage too. Also,
yeah, it's a garage somewhere.
Mom's. Your mom's.
Oh, whoa, now.
Shots fired.
Yeah, easy. Okay, so this one's interesting, and you're not going to be surprised that I'm putting this name out here. What's your guys' take on an ultra? No, an ultra buy high like a Judkins? Because you're buying peak. Well, maybe the peak is higher than it is right now, but the value is extra high on a Judkins, where you're giving up draft capital. You're giving up a young player, probably. Is that a guy that you might buy on a contending team, or would you maybe shy away from that just because the price is so astronomical?
Well, the price is probably prohibitive, but a player like him that may be a little bit less is Omarion Hampton.
Yeah, that's nice, and that's almost kind of ties into the archetype where he's a guy who's hurt and should be coming back. You talked about Brandon Ayuk. We were talking about George Kittle. So there's a lot of those guys where, I mean, as long as the injury wasn't super catastrophic, that they're going to have a hard time getting back to speed necessarily. Or in a case like Ayuk, who has had a ton of time for that recovery. I think those are really nice plays, and so Omarion Hampton.
I think the Omarion manager could potentially be starving for fantasy points at the running back position. You may be able to sell, a DeAndre Swift plus a first or something. I'm making this up, where he's like, you know what, let's do it or whatever. Maybe you have to add some stupid. You add Jaden Higgins. You know what I mean? You're like, whatever. Yeah, take a bunch of stuff. You want Ben Sinnott? I've got Ben Sinnott. I got Ben Sinnott.
I got one here. Say you are not a contender, and you have Quinshawn, and you're offered Omarion for him straight up. What are you doing right now?
Squeezing, but taking. Yeah. So in other words, I'll take Omarion, but I'll squeeze him.
Omarion.
Yeah, but I'm going to squeeze him because this is obviously what they're doing. They're saying, hey, look, the difference is I don't care about the production over the next 4 or 5 weeks. You do. What is that worth? That's worth a second or something. That's worth some sort of thing, a second, third swap, something.
Something's got to be really nice for me right now, though, because Quinshawn, goddamn.
Here's another.
I'll still take Omarion.
Here's another interesting name. Kind of, it's somewhat along the lines of kind of that Breece Hall, right? Is what do you do with Javonte Williams right now, right? Coming up, he's had the major injury in the past. I think he's 25 right now. He's on the 1-year deal in Dallas, so it's not like we know that he's going to be in that great offensive situation, for the future. And he's almost playing so well that he's likely playing himself out of Dallas next year. Unless I can't imagine they're going to tag him, just because then. But then, do they use some of the Parsons money to go ahead and re-sign him? It just feels like with the season that he's having, he's going to have somewhat of a price tag next year. But again, 25 has been extremely productive. What are you guys paying for Javonte right now? Or if you're say you're looking to start rebuilding, what are you asking for?
Can I just say, Jax, before you go in, the Cowboys spending edge rusher Micah Parsons money on a running back in Javonte Williams after the Zeke contract would be absolute fucking cinema.
Yeah.
Jax, carry on with Javonte, but I have seen on Dynasty Daddy some people getting a first out of them. I think you take that to the fucking bank.
Yeah. I'm not buying for a first. I might buy for that second potentially, but I think there's something interesting that Wiz is hitting on, which is that he's probably going to play next year. Like he's playing great. Look, that's the other thing too. If we remember properly, we loved Javonte as a prospect coming out of North Carolina, tackle breaker, violent runner, could really make things happen. Great pass catcher, viable in the pass game. He was 5th in the NFL last year in targets. He's getting targeted again this year. I think he's 1st or 2nd in the NFL in touchdowns from the running back position this year. Like, this is awesome. So I don't see it going away this year. So you could buy the production, but you also have the potential out of, actual production coming to fruition next year and the year after. Like, he's 25 years old. He could be 26, 27, 28. Like, he could have another 2-3 year window potentially where he's actually still productive. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in Javonte Williams as long as I don't have to not paying a first. That just, that's just not okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to use that first and see what I can get with it, like CMC. Oh, I have to pay a little bit more than that first plus to get CMC, or you know what I mean? So yeah, I'm going to try and really get something elite with a first. Never going to be a Javonte Williams
that's
level.
That's more of a selling cost as opposed to a buying
absolutely.
price for sure. Yeah, for sure. Very nice, boys. Very nice. Couple of QBs on the docket here, guys. I'm just gonna fire off the names. I got the weed pen out. We're at the point where we're letting our hair down and just firing names off here, boys. And so I'm gonna fire off a couple quarterback names. You guys let me know what you think about them. We got Joe Flacco, Matt Stafford, who's having an insane year. I heard on some show that he's on pace for over 40 touchdowns this year, which was not necessarily on the bingo card, especially if you look at his ADP.
We called that shit.
Maybe not 40 plus touchdowns, Jax.
Look,
but
I thought that was in the dude. Come on, man.
100%.
Rewind the tape. Rewind the tape.
Yep.
The one thing I was saying is that
I'm more of a
Matt
guy.
Stafford it was a smash button in the thing about it that I find interesting is I smashed him even on like a productive struggle team that's he's scoring points for me. People aren't buying. I'm like, why is nobody coming for Matt Stafford? He could play this year. He could certainly play next year, which is why I'm almost just going to keep him. I mean, there's an injury bug that is possible, and I know you don't get 1-for-1 replacement, but I also have Jimmy G wherever I have Stafford. Dude, Stafford is just money. It's money.
Yeah,
totally.
The
other name was. Go ahead.
Just to jump off the stat, he just feels like he's playing, to Jax's point, right? Like, I think coming into the season with a lot of people that were either looking to sell him, the prospective buyer was like, all right, well, I'm buying him for 1 year, right? Well, now you're buying like pretty like high end production for this year, but also because he's playing at such a high level this year, he's increasing his likelihood of playing next year. Right. And I think that's what you kind of have to look at with, some of these guys in their situations. It's like at some point, the pendulum is going to swing so far if they're playing that well that they're playing themselves into a role next season that we did not see 6-7 weeks ago. Right. And I think identifying those opportunities is probably where you have the most value, because if Jax is saying that, nobody wants to buy him, that should tell you that he's a value. Right. Like,
yes.
Yeah. 100%. Totally. And to your point about maybe getting a little bit more time out of him, seems like him and his wife are pretty entrenched in LA, kind of comfortable spot for him. You know what I mean? He's a guy coming into a window for this team that's looking really good. Could be a guy that just hangs on for a couple of years where the question is up in the air in the offseason. Then he decides that he's going to strap the old helmet back on. And so, I mean, if there's ever a fucking gamer at the quarterback position, it's fucking Matt Stafford.
True that, man.
And it's not even just that, right? There's other factors in play. It's like, all right, well, like if Devontae was looking a little bit more washed this year, is there less incentive to come back? Like, he still looks like fantastic. So there's just a lot of stuff in play where it feels like you're getting more than just production this year.
Bingo.
Yeah. The other guy, Wiz, I was going to throw at you, Danny Dimes. Who would have thought 12 months ago that we would have been saying this, boys?
Not me.
Nope, not me either.
So this is a super interesting one, because I feel like the recent history here is, if you look at the Minnesota Vikings last year, right? Like, obviously they came off that terrible loss in the playoffs and moved on for the guy that they drafted, 11th overall, 10th overall in JJ. I don't think the Colts are going to make that mistake and let the guy that just led them to whatever they lead to, right? Like, whatever they end up at, they're 6-1 right now.
There's no contingency.
There's no contingency. And if a guy goes out and wins you 12, 13 games, and Danny Dimes is still what, 28 years old, maybe?
Yeah.
They're not letting him walk
Around
out of the
there.
building. And I just, if that's the case and he's going to be tied to Steichen and the skill guys around him, that to me says this is not going to be necessarily a flash in the pan. I'd be really surprised if he's not in Indianapolis Colt next year.
And even if you are like looking at the situation in Minnesota with Sam Darnold moving on, that's kind of backfiring on the Vikings right now too, because Sam
Exactly.
Darnold's playing fucking great. Like he's playing great, and the young guys are not. So yeah, I think they have to. They absolutely have to. Think about what that fan base would do after the AR debacle, and then they get Danny Dimes in here playing phenomenal and just let him go, right? There is no way they're doing that. And so he's played so good. I think he's the best quarterback still in fantasy points per drop back. He runs the ball. We know that. He's miraculously actually now throwing fucking dimes. Like it's insane. You watch him every single Sunday and it's like, holy shit, that ball was nice. Like, Jax, what are you feeling here? Because this is a weird one to even say.
It's crazy. Like if you look at his career, none of it makes sense. Like, I'll just read. This is like quarterback rate, 87. This is from 2019 on. 87, 80, 84. His big year, 92, 70, 79. This year, 106. Like crazy. His QBR is even crazier. 55, 54, 47. His good year, 62, 37, 44. His QBR this year is 80. Like,
Oh my God.
it's crazy. These are bonkers numbers. Like, he is unbelievable. The success rate, same thing. It's like 40, 40, 40, 40, 57 this year, like 57%. Like, everything you look at, you're like, that is crazy. So interception rate is down. Like, everything is, he's only taken 6 sacks this year. His sack rate is 2.73. That is
unbelievable.
Unbelievable. 2 years ago, it was 16% sack rate with New York in 2023. Like, it's just unbelievable. Like, his career sack rate is 8%, 2.73 this year. So, look, this is an absolutely amazing run out. I can't imagine it holds. I mean, his adjusted net yards per attempt had never been over 5.5. It's 8.21 this year. It's, you look at it, it's like, it doesn't even make any sense. He's a completely different player. I do think there's going to be some regression to the mean. I do think it's not always going to be like this, but it's really good right now. And, I still think you're buying, not necessarily at these higher values. I don't think he's necessarily being sold as, some sort of top 15 dynasty quarterback. So I still think it's okay to buy.
Yeah, so I agree with Jax. I think you're still getting like a Daniel Jones name discount, right? Just because I
Yes.
think there's a lot of people out there that probably still don't believe in this. But what the
Right.
situation that the situation that this reminds me of more than anything else, it's like almost when Baker went to Tampa, had the great year, and ends up he finds himself a good situation, like ignites his career, ends up signing the extension there, and is now, how many times have we talked about, or I've heard you guys talk about, others talk about how, over the past year, Baker has been one of the best fantasy values for fantasy quarterbacks. And Jax, I do agree with you that there's him keeping up this level of production, like, he's next to Lamar, Allen, Hurts, like Mahomes, like when you're talking about fantasy points per dropback. But the thing is, I think seeing Steichen, first of all, Steichen's historical resume with quarterbacks is fantastic, right? Outside of AR, what we've seen him do with Hurts, what we've seen him do with Herbert. So he has this in him as far as like this quarterback guru. And I just think that because of the discount that you're still getting on Daniel Jones, I would not be surprised that if he gets that 2-3 year extension, that's an immediate bump in value. And now your price has gone up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's looking on Dynasty Daddy like the general price for buying Daniel Jones in a Superflex league is a 26 first and like a throw-in. I'm seeing throw-ins, maybe not so much throw-ins, but I'm seeing like a Terrence Ferguson on top of a 26 first. I see somebody put a Zach Wilson on top of a 26 first just to get some sort of quarterback back. And I think I would probably pay a first for Daniel Jones if I am in need of a quarterback right now.
Yeah, sure.
It'd be weird to do. Like, it would be a tough stomach to send that offer. But if
Yeah,
it came into me, sure.
yeah. Hard to click it over to somebody, but maybe a little easier to stand over and eventually just
Yeah.
find the confirm button at some point.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple
Or
drinks.
you just
Yeah,
DM and say, dude, I actually can't press this. Could you send me an offer for
yeah.
my
Yeah.
26 first for Daniel Jones? I
Yeah,
can't press it.
you're sitting over it like a suicide letter. You're just like, oh boy, let me have another drink. I can't do this. I can't do this. But
Yeah,
yeah,
like
Just
eventually
put
you
the
just
gun
get it.
down, Jax. Put the gun down.
Yeah,
some trades, like you want to break your phone hitting the accept button. This one, you're taking like a 10-foot pole and standing away from your phone and like fucking tapping it that
yeah,
way.
exactly. Yeah,
Putting
exactly.
on your touch screen gloves for it, just so
Yeah.
you
Whew,
don't have to actually touch it.
gonna
Yeah,
be
yeah.
rough. This is crazy. This is crazy. This is crazy. Little
Well, what do you think about
vacation.
that as a way for us to wrap, fellas?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, fun episode. Wiz, I can't say enough how thankful I am that you're always ready and willing to jump in and step in for Joe. One of these days, we will get the whole crew of us four on the screen at one time. But until then, like I said, it's always a treat to have you join the show, chat, even just to see a pre-show and just chat about life and all that shit. It's great. You are always family of the underground. You know that. And yeah, to the listeners, thanks again. We're still having fun doing it. The season is an absolute grind, but we roll on for the Miyagi Jax Falcone, for the freak in the spreadsheets, Dan Wisner, for Joe Quavius Kuvatakis. I am Trav, and we will see you next week. Peace.